Talking about that conflict, American gun violence. 4 American schools this week had shooting incidents. They've just, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention last week, there was a historic increase. The largest increase, 35% increase year on year in the number of homicides by gun.
It ties into what we were talking about before.
Yeah, you push fear and hatred, and all of a sudden you're surprised when there's conflict and death.
Yeah.
But I mean, how long? When does the crisis point? When is there a tipping point where people say, enough? I don't want to have to worry that every time my child goes to school, they're going to be shot at. That I can walk the streets without fear of being robbed or raped or having my car taken from me.
My answer, move to Beijing.
Yeah. The wolf warrior strikes again. No, but
no,
I mean,
it's true.
But I mean, this is what is odd, because I talk to people who go abroad from China, not just Beijing, and they just said, well, it's hard to get used to this idea that I have to be careful.
That's right.
I was never careful when I was in China.
That's right.
Do bad things happen here? Absolutely.
They do, sure.
But in such a small percentage.
That's right.
And when they do happen, like that terrible incident with a woman being beaten in the restaurant, what happened? I think there are 19 people in custody and counting.
That's right.
And they're going to be punished. You know, this is something that I think
But like you said, when your income is falling every year or every month, when your livelihood is, your life gets worse and worse, and not get better and better.
And your life expectancy went down by 3 years.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then always complaining about others, always complaining about a potential enemy.
Well, but there's reason for that. All you've just said, you know, the income being stagnant, all right, polarization.
That's right.
It's not just economic, it's political and social.
That's right.
And now, you know, I noticed the United States has thrown out the convictions of the guys who rigged LIBOR.
And made millions and millions and millions in the process.
No, not millions.
Billions.
Yes. Over time.
Yeah.
And this was the most trusted rate.
That's
it
right.
determined your mortgage, it determined the amount that you paid on contracts. It was the gold standard. And then to find out that these guys, and now these guys, one guy has been exonerated. It will lead to the rest of them being exonerated. So once again, just like the financial crisis, terrible things happen, but no one's at fault.
That's
no
right.
one goes to jail.
No one goes to jail
No.
for doing very, very illegal and fraudulent things.
Well, it undermines the whole basis of capitalism and the free market when you have people manipulating the system for their own
personal gain
and the gain of their institutions. So talking about legal stuff, U.S. Supreme Court, I just had to mention this. Justice Alito, okay, he had an interview with Ted Kennedy, and they found the notes of the interview, and it was in a journal. And he clearly says that he's going to uphold Roe versus Wade. And he gave his basis for doing that to start, you know, that it's a precedent, there's no good reason to revisit it, I would never do that. Now, Kennedy voted against his nomination because he didn't believe him.
Right.
And then, lo and behold, last summer, a draft of what he wrote, all right, was leaked. And what he wrote was in direct opposite to what he told Kennedy when he was being things. And now he's complaining that, oh, people shouldn't leak things. Well, I guess he's afraid of the truth. Now, I agree. Supreme Court opinions should not be leaked. But neither should a Supreme Court justice lie.
Yeah.
Just out and out lie and then try to cover it and point to others as saying it. This is like the U.S. government saying, yeah, we did all those things, Snowden said, but you know, he shouldn't have done that. Oh, wait a second, that's what they're saying.
But, oh, wait a second. You have a completely confused White House. You have a completely messed up Congress. Yeah. How do you think the Supreme Court or the legal system, which is one of the three pillars of the...
But I mean, that was very deliberate. The conservative side said that we cannot always depend on democracy. So therefore, we will select the branch of government where we can have the most control with the least amount of effort, and that's the Supreme Court, because you're there for life.
That's right.
Once they install you, it's almost impossible to get rid of you.
But it shows the U.S. in terms of its entire governance system has problems on every front, even in the Supreme Court, which people thought was really quite independent and was really quite fair.
I want to talk about the affirmative action is on the Supreme Court docket. They're going to hear a number of cases about it.
Oh boy.
And it's very interesting. What they're doing is they're not bringing forth African American, Hispanic plaintiffs. They're using Asians because Asians were artificially capped at universities. They say, well, we can take the top 3-4%, but we don't want more than that. So we will.
Your grades are too good.
Well, your test scores are too high, and your grades are too good, and we have to make room for white boys.
Yeah.
So it's. I mean, I think it's ironic that they're trying to undo
Use that.
something that was aimed at just creating societal fairness. Whether it did or not is another issue. The issue is.
Einar.
Yeah.
I got into Princeton on a scholarship, and that scholarship was for minorities.
Well, you have benefited. Unlike Justice Clarence Thomas, you don't deny it. But I mean,
I think universities at that time, when I went to university, were happy to take more Asians instead of other minorities. So
I was the only Asian at my law school, but somehow I made the cover of the booklet that they distributed to potential things twice. I was only there 3 years. They printed
not
every
because you
year.
were good looking.
No, that is well settled. But it seemed like me and some other minorities were on the front cover when in fact we were the smallest percentage of the class. Okay, democracies seem to be failing themselves. The essence of a democratic system is that you have a vote, and then after the vote, the loser goes away, and the winner takes over. We're looking at situations in the United States where Trump said, "I didn't lose," despite producing no evidence to the contrary, and it's being echoed by the people he's supporting to be in Congress, in the Senate, and in the secretaries of state who control the voting, and also in the governor's offices. So has democracy failed in the U.S.?
From a very pragmatic point of view, it's amazing how all of this is draining energy, draining resources, preventing the government from doing what it's supposed to be doing in terms of improving the lives of its people.
Yeah, you're not answering my question.
I'm not.
I know. I'm going to answer it. It has failed.
It has failed. Yeah.
When you have 1/3 of your people who say, "I don't believe in the democratic process anymore because I don't trust it," and you have leaders actively pushing that, that means that democracy has in fact failed.
It has failed.
And the question is it going to be extended to Brazil and other places?
That's right. The Brazilian election.
Yeah. We'll talk more about that later.
Yes.
Let's talk about China. Growth numbers came in very nicely. As opposed to U.S., the numbers came in, but the Chinese numbers also, what do you think of those?
I think it's actually better than I thought it was. I think we're going to see a major V-shaped recovery in the first quarter of next year.
After the 2 sessions?
After the 2 sessions. I think the party and the government now have very concrete objectives and plans in terms of what to do with the economy and how to deal with the problems that the economy faces.
Give some examples.
Okay, in terms of real estate market, there has to be some ways of addressing it, just like what happened in the 1990s, where you had a bad asset, the good and bad asset bank set up to address these issues. In terms of the financial system, the reserve ratio is still very, very high. So there's a lot more liquidity that can be extended. But how to extend it to help those who really are in need, the small and medium-sized private companies, that's something that has to be worked out. I think the distribution of power between the central and the regional, or the provincial or the local areas, there are some very concrete things which are being formulated. I think that there are just a lot of things which came out of the 20th Party Congress and that would be put into the administration after the two meetings in February.
For me, logically, there's a couple of things. All right, one, they need to soak up the excess real estate on the market.
Yeah.
Without rewarding these developers who went too far.
That's right.
So taking them out, I like the bad bank idea, but
Yeah.
instead of trying to sell those units, I think it would be better if they buy the units and then rent them.
That's right. Long-term leases. They're already working out a concrete program to do that. It's 长租, the expression long-term lease, is allowing people to live in a decent place without having to put up the cash to buy the place. Yeah, that's already in the works. I think by early next year, it will be fully implemented.
There's also this thing. I mean, they want to increase the population or give families the opportunity to have more than one or two child, up to three.
Yeah.
And I think the logical way is not trying to build bigger homes. You have a lot of existing housing stock. It makes more sense to me to say to families, I said, well, if you have 3 children, we will put you in a place where you have 2 apartments.
Yeah.
And the second apartment you can keep until you have back down to three people. Kids are 18 or whatever. I think that would be very interesting because you're not giving them the real estate. They're not buying it, okay? They can use it for as long as it's necessary to keep it. And then they can have their parents there, the grandparents, helping take care of the kids. There's 2 discrete units. And then eventually
there are a lot of ways that these plans, as you described, can be.
And the other part is, and we've talked about this before, they need to have a property tax. Gradual, all right?
Has to be gradual.
Has to be very gradual.
Yeah.
You don't want to spook the market.
Yeah.
But this idea that you can hold property that uses, public facilities, roads, streets, sewers, and things like that, but not really pay anything in terms of taxes is not a good idea. So it stabilizes, it addresses 2 issues. It addresses this issue of trying to hold property for investment, because now your cost of holding it goes up, and then also it provides a revenue stream to local governments.
There are other issues involved in exactly the point that you're raising, because when you're buying an apartment, you're not buying a fee simple.
No.
So how do you address the issue of actual ownership and title together with taxes and these other issues? So it's actually quite complex.
Yeah, and it is.
It has to be addressed,
but
though.
The old idea of front-loading all of the costs.
Yeah.
So when you buy it, the land has been provided by the municipality.
Yeah.
They're getting a large chunk of that,
Yeah.
and they use that to put in the infrastructure. Unfortunately, all the money goes away. They don't put it into a fund, and then
for maintenance and so on and so forth.
Your maintenance and placement capital costs become an issue. Okay. So, foreign leaders to visit China.
Busy week in Beijing this week.
Yeah, well, EU, Vietnam, Pakistan, and Tanzania. So
Germany,
Well, I'm saying that
including
from
EU,
areas. From areas. So you have Europe, all right. You have Africa, Southeast Asia,
and South Asia,
and South Asia, all coming to China 1 week.
Actually, 5 days.
in 5 days. Now, here's something when I was looking at this, that from from 1990 to 2019, all right, China has beaten the U.S. in the number of leaders, heads of state, visiting, right? Every year except 2013. I mean, can you imagine the U.S. most powerful country? We're in 1990. There's no, I mean, China's, you know what? I mean, this is 2001. China joins WTO.
That's right.
So from 1990 to 2019, every year except 2013, more leaders come to China than they go to the U.S. And then
It's not because they like Chinese food, is it?
well, trade. But I mean, just to give you an example, in 2019, just before the pandemic, 79 foreign leaders visited China. Only 27 came to the U.S. I mean, the statistics are there.
That's right.
It's overwhelming in terms of the trend line. And it really speaks volumes about trade, relations.
Yeah, the latest numbers, I think, in terms of trade and commercial relations, from 130, now it's over 140 countries have China as the principal trading partner.
There's
Over
only a little less than 200 countries out
That's
there.
right.
Yeah.
Out of that, 140 now, over 140 now.
I think the U.S. is like 5 or something
Yeah.
like that.
But I think, yeah, that's because of Mexico and Canada and a few Caribbean countries. Jamaican rum,
Yeah.
good stuff. Jamaican cigars too.
Yeah, but I mean, it really does speak to the economic gravity.
That's right. Shifting from the west to
shifting
the east.
Yeah.
And I think these visits are particularly interesting is because it's immediately after the 20th Party Congress. You start with the General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam. He's still in Beijing. Immediately followed by Prime Minister of Pakistan and Tanzania, and then Germany. The German visit is particularly interesting because of Chairman of BASF, Chairman of Volkswagen, Chairman of Siemens.
They're all coming.
They're all coming.
And he's espoused that despite the nasty things that Germany is saying about China, that they want to have a normal,
healthy commercial
economic
relationship.
Yeah, we don't like your politics. You're a horrible country.
Yeah.
We see you as, you know, as
We cannot disengage.
competitor, but we don't want to disengage. But Olaf is not doing very well in the polls in Germany. Less than over 50% thinks that he's not up to the job. Obviously, he had a meeting with Macron.
That didn't go very well.
Apparently not.
Yeah.
So, you know, a disunified Europe, Germany going its own way in contradiction of a lot of its own rhetoric, all the things it's saying.
Yeah.
These are troubled times.
You look at, for example, their Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Economy and I think Climate. What they've been saying about China has been just outrageous ideological garbage about, we've been too naive about China.
It's all a big conspiracy.
Yeah,
China's
that's
wanting
right.
to take over the world.
That's right.
You know, this is going to be a theme when we talk about this. I think the greatest fear that the Europeans and Americans have, the former colonial powers, is that other nations will do to them what they did to others.
Yeah.
And I think that is a real psychological barrier to kind of opening up. There's this real insecurity that, you know, the things we did.
That's absolutely true. That's a major component. The other major component, unfortunately, I think is racism. The yellow horde.
Well, it's not just yellow, black, brown.
Yeah.
And anybody who isn't white.
But in China's case, it's the yellow horde because of the population size, right?
Yeah.
I've traveled extensively throughout Europe.
Is it really because of the population? India has a huge population, a huge diaspora.
But unfortunately for India, they have not grown. They have not become a powerhouse economically.
That's my point. The issue is China's success.
That's right.
If China was a failure, we wouldn't be talking about any of this.
That's right.
Yeah. But I mean, now you have the first Hindu, one of the youngest prime ministers
Ever.
and of Indian descent, although through Africa, is now the prime minister
of a country whose GDP has fallen below India's.
Yes. Well, a little difference in population. But what's interesting is he has reappointed a woman who is virulently anti-immigration,
Yeah.
has links to right-wing organizations who are basically racist.
Yeah.
And he's keeping her on as head of immigration. I mean, you see a brown face and then this white face next to it. I wonder what she actually thinks of him. You know, on the BBC, they had a gentleman call in.
I heard that one.
And I heard it. And basically,
Yes.
the gentleman says, well, this guy, he ain't one of us.
That's right.
He said, what do you mean? He says,
We're
"Well,
Anglo-Saxons."
We're Anglo-Saxons. Can you imagine, me being president of Russia or things like that? And here's the irony. Great Britain did rule a lot of other countries.
That's right.
White guys who were in charge of vast areas inhabited by brown, Asian,
Yeah.
and
All kinds of people.
black.
Oh, in terms of Pakistani visit,
You know?
it's interesting that the Prime Minister is coming with at least 6 federal ministers, apparently with a wide range of subjects to be discussed. It's,
Well, no one wants to talk about it anymore, but the floods have not completely
That's right.
receded. You still have
the rebuilding is going to be a massive
millions of
undertaking.
people who are displaced.
Yeah.
Money to rebuild, things like that.
Mhm.
Now, you're helping on a project that is trying to
Prefab housing.
prefab housing,
Yeah.
Deliver it at cost to
Yeah.
these people.
Yeah. It's
How's that
not
going?
easy. It's not easy because you need infrastructure for these prefab housing to be workable. Sewage, water, electricity. So all of that infrastructure has been wiped out. So it's actually quite a significant planning process to have it all done so that it can be appropriately set up.
Yeah.
It's in progress.
Okay. Well, let's hope. And I know that you were thanked personally by the Pakistan Prime Minister for your work in raising money and funds for the
We
people
try.
of Pakistan.
We try.
Yeah.
The Chinese population has been very positive. The common folks have been very positive, contributing 200, 300 RMB, so on and so forth.
Yeah, young people.
That's
The age demographics were amazing.
That's
A
right.
lot of young people,
That's
and
right.
very small amounts of money at a time when unemployment is very high.
That's right.
And they have their own concerns. They could easily just say, look, I don't have time or energy for these people.
Yeah.
Or other things. I have my own problems. Instead, they're giving.
Yep, they are.
It's a very hopeful sign.
Global South.
Yeah.
That's part of being in the Global South and working together, isn't it?
Well, you hope so. Global South, let's just briefly, Bolsonaro, let's hope that
Oh,
he
but
accepts.
before we go to
Yeah?
Bolsonaro, we come back to this foreign visitor thing. I think what's interesting about the Global South is also what's happening to a lot of new or more recently formed multilateral organizations, like
RCEP.
RCEP, like Shanghai Cooperation Organization, like
AIIB.
AIIB and BRICS, for example. All these things now are becoming magnets to attract other developing countries who want to join multilateral organizations that's not dominated by the West.
Well, not only that, but I mean, the U.S. has refused to do any new multilateral.
That's right.
They refuse to allow
Except their own.
They refuse to allow the WTO to function because they won't allow any
That's right.
appellate judges. They want to do bilateral only.
Yeah,
And I think a choice between doing a bilateral with the U.S. and their overwhelming power versus coming in as an equal into a multilateral, I don't think it's much of a choice.
yeah. A lot of people don't know about the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It was set up basically to fight terrorism among the stans, including Afghanistan, of course. And now it's become an organization in which India is in, Pakistan is in,
But
and
not not playing well together.
Now playing well together, but I think Saudi Arabia wants to join.
There are 5 other countries.
Iran
Turkey.
wants to join, Turkey, and so on and so forth. It's gone way beyond just simple.
I know, but it's now being identified by the State Department as a threat.
That's right.
As some sort of anti-NATO alliance, when in fact there is no alliance.
That's right.
It is simply a group that says we will fight extremism, separatism, and terrorism.
That's right.
Within your country. We will help you fight these kinds of forces.
Yeah.
But there's no outward things. There's not, if you're attacked, I will come to your aid.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah. But BRICS is very interesting too. Argentina wants to join.
Yeah. 5 more countries.
Yeah.
Start with 5. 5 more want to join.
And Saudi Arabia in particular is interesting. Saudi Arabia is actively pursuing both BRICS and SEO, and tie that in to what the Saudi foreign minister announced the day before yesterday, that President Xi Jinping will visit Saudi Arabia in the near future.
And probably UAE.
And UAE as well.
UAE,
That's right.
Yeah.
Possibly other Arab leaders.
Well, I'm sure Qatar will want him to come to there as well.
That's right.
He's a big football fan. Too bad he won't be able to make the World Cup.
When does World Cup start?
It starts, I think, January or
No, November.
November. Oh yes, later
He
this
may
month.
be able to.
Well, that would be great. She could throw out the first ball.
That's right. He's a real fan of football.
So we have to talk a little bit about the tragedy in South Korea.
Oh, yes.
And, you know, it's basically, for anybody who wants to know, it's just, you know, too many people trying to go up and down what was a steep, narrow incline. There's buildings on both sides, and people were moving around, and at some point they fell. There was, you know, beer and costumes and you know.
And apparently it's very narrow streets. There are people coming in opposite direction.
Exactly. And they just, the
Press
of people.
100,000 people.
Yeah, and many people died. But this is a tragedy, but one wonders, you know, in India, they had a situation where a bridge collapsed.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
100 and some odd people died. What is the role of government? I mean, this Seoul, the city of Seoul has said, look, we weren't prepared for it. Okay, we didn't understand it. There's a lot of criticism in China because they're very, very cognizant of this. They don't like, everything has to be figured out. And they'll put up these...
Beforehand.
They put up
That's
the
right.
barriers, and they'll limit the number of people coming in.
That's
and
right.
things like that.
Yeah.
Any venue will have an absolute number.
Yeah.
If there's a district event, they're keeping control of things.
Yeah.
But, you know, for some people that says, oh no, that goes against my freedom. All right, I should be able to go where I want. But when does, you know, where is that line between individual choice and societal responsibility start? I would like to ask some people who've told me that I don't want anyone telling me what to do. I said, but in a situation like this, with a pandemic, with a bridge, with this, isn't there something that should happen? Shouldn't government be involved? Isn't government the only one who can effectively be involved?
And government's responsibility is to plan these things out so what occurred in Seoul would not happen.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's the role of government. But if you talk to a lot of people, they'll just say, no, I don't want that. And I'm just wondering, what has gone wrong with our society that people just say, I don't care how many people die in the pandemic. I don't care how many people die on a bridge. I don't care how many people die.
I don't care how many people die from gun violence.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Or who die in Ukraine.
In the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Well, what we have...
Why is this indifference today?
I think there are several things here. One is the continued aggressive promotion of the ideological aspect of common values.
Yeah, but this is going to the heart of that.
Yeah.
Common values is based on this idea of freedom.
Yeah,
And freedom means that no one can tell me what to do or say. I can do and say whatever I want to do.
And
I don't
then-
have to take a vaccine because my right, my freedom is to not take one. It doesn't matter if I infect other people.
Yeah.
That's their problem, not mine.
yeah,
Government shouldn't be able to tell me where I can go to have a good party or have a good time. And then if people die, well,
that's too bad.
it's too bad. I didn't die, so I don't
That's
care.
right.
There seems to be a massive amount of indifference. I think
It's
that's the same.
indifference, but it's also individualism to the extreme. It's extreme individualism. This is part of what 20th Party Congress talked about. Modernization, Western modernization is based very much on individualism. And whereas China tries to promote modernization on the basis of collective societal good. Hope other countries can also learn something from the Chinese experience in this.
You know what? I think everybody should always try to be learning from each
Others,
other.
yeah.
Whatever your system is, there's something to learn. It's not just one teacher. We should all be students.
I think we should learn both the good and the bad aspects of each.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you can only, if you can understand people's mistakes and prevent yourself from doing the same
That's
thing
right.
over. That's good.
Okay.
Well, another
That's
day.
another day. That's
Thank
another
you.
week.
Another week. Next week. All right. Speak
Hope
softly.
it's still.
Charles and Einar.
I hope it's still sunny and beautiful next week.
Yeah.
It's getting cold.
It's getting cold, and it's going to get colder.
Yeah.
All right.